Hey everyone, welcome to today's discussion. My name is Raj Badi, the Division Director of our consulting practice here in Edmonton. We're very excited to be hosting this discussion today with some amazing startups in Edmonton. Thank you all for joining us today. Through our discussion today, we will be exploring how small business leaders have had to navigate incredible change in recent months, not only due to reduced energy revenues, but of course the COVID-19 pandemic. We look forward to hearing how Mike, Amir, Alyssa, and Ryan and their teams have handled these unique experiences and managed these challenges. To get things started, I wanted to introduce our moderator for today, Evangeline Barubi. Evangeline is a branch manager of our senior level consulting practice here in Edmonton. So with that, I'll pass it over to Evangeline.
Thank you, Rajan. Now, before we meet today's panelists, I want to make a couple of quick points related to the format of today's webinar. We have designated time for questions at the end, but in case, due to time constraints, we don't get to all the questions, please type them into the chat box, which is at the lower part of your screen, and we will send out a summary and highlight a few of the key questions following the webinar. So now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our illustrious panel. Firstly, Ryan Tucker, CEO, G2V Optics Incorporated. Alyssa Lefebvre, Senior Manager, Business Development at Alta ML. Amir Reshef, CEO, Deal Closer. And last, but certainly not least, Michael Wilson, CEO, Drug Bank. Again, welcome, and we're looking forward to today's discussion. So now we're going to start off with each panelist going through and sharing a little bit about their organization's story, providing some initial insights into how these current challenges have affected them. So why don't we have Ryan start us off? Ryan?
Thanks, Evangeline. So as Evangeline mentioned, I'm Ryan, CEO of G2V Optics, and G2V is a fast-growing junior tech company here in Edmonton. We're about 5 years old, but really the last 2 years have been pretty explosive growth for us up until March and COVID, everything that happened. The thing that G2V does, we focus on, we deliver precision technologies to customers who are making the world better using data and light. So primary customers are vertical farmers and aerospace companies who need really precise light to test things like solar cells or grow plants better. We have a whole data science product set of ways that we can improve plant growth, nutrition, and things like that in vertical and greenhouse locations. In terms of our story, the company was founded 5 years ago by founder Mike Taschuk based on some advanced lighting control technology invented originally at the University of Alberta for testing solar cells. And it became obvious that this could impact plant growth in really interesting ways. So Mike founded the company, and for about the first 2.5, 3 years, operated as a sole founder operator and engaged in some different incubators and things like that. And about 2.5 years ago, Mike, a longtime friend of mine, joined in the company, and we refactored the company to look at how can we scale this and bring this technology to market now that he developed it. And so that first 2 years, we started getting some real traction, and then with some major technology companies and cultivators, which led us to about a 10x growth over the course of 18 months. We went from 2 people to over 20 people, 10x in revenue, and raised seed financing. So really overnight went from 2 people in a basement through a couple of small commercial spaces to what looks like on the outside a real functioning business. But at the same time, when you're growing that quickly, raising capital, everything is about momentum. And so you're trying to hire talent, work to milestones, building up to the next big capital raise. And so when COVID hit, that was the major thing that our focus, we can talk of this throughout the panel, but our major focus was how do we maintain momentum? Because everything is built on speed, and it's like a bicycle tire that'll only stand up if it's moving forward. So that was really our focus and what we've been working on.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So momentum, we'll keep that in our back pocket. And Alyssa, did you want to tell us about your story?
Yeah, you bet. Hi, everyone. Alyssa Lefebvre from Alta ML, the Senior Business Development Manager there. The origin story of Alta ML really is one about some foresight, entrepreneurship, and frankly, a little bit of luck. The story goes back kind of to the early 2000s when the government of Alberta made a very large and astute investment into artificial intelligence and machine learning research at the University of Alberta. And so what this investment did is it attracted a huge amount of AI research talent, world-renowned in their fields. And then subsequently, these researchers attracted talent from all over the world to come study and do AI research at the U of A. Unfortunately, what was happening though is all of this talent was mostly leaving Alberta for Toronto or Silicon Valley and that type of thing. So our very entrepreneurial co-founders, Nicole and Corey Jansen, realized there was an enormous opportunity to harness this glut of talent that's not staying here and to create a bridge between industry and the research talent at the U of A. So what UltiML ultimately does is we want to harness artificial intelligence to elevate human potential. And so we're building machine learning AI products to augment the businesses and industry here in Alberta. And this has the potential to essentially elevate the entire economy and support our existing, strong sectors here. So, I would echo some of the comments that Ryan made about momentum. That was a big thing. We certainly had to readjust our expectations of Q2 enormously. But I would say that the biggest thing for us is just being very cognizant, aware of the mental health of all of our people. I think we can dive into that a little bit more too, but not having that face-to-face interaction and making sure that everyone still feels engaged, motivated, and has that hand on the culture that's really important to us has been a priority. We have onboarded a little bit during COVID as well. So understanding how to engage people, in a virtual environment, if they're joining the team, is another big area that, we can talk to later. But that's a brief overview of UltiML.
Perfect, thank you. Well, and one thing I'm seeing in both our speakers so far is also the U of A being kind of the root of where this technology and talent comes from, which is really exciting. So Amir, did you want to tell us a bit about your story?
Sure, thank you. So my name is Amir. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a legal technology startup called Deal Closer. For a bit of background about the company before I get into the story, we are a transaction management platform. That's what we call this kind of technology. So we work with corporate and tax lawyers to help make the very manual and paper-based, I'm sure many of you have experienced being on deals as clients, the very paper-based process, we bring it online and automate and eliminate a lot of the really non-value added tasks that have to get done to keep a deal moving, but are not, well, they don't really add much value, and they're soul crushing, really, especially if you've gone to law school and then you find yourself at 5 a.m. making sure everyone has signed their 1,000 documents or whatever it is. From about early last year to now, we've experienced close to 400% growth. We went from 3 people to now 12. We have customers all over North America, soon the UK, potentially if things keep going as they are. COVID, and I know there's questions on this, so I won't get into it in too much detail now, but COVID was unique for us because we are a tool that enables remote collaboration for a process that was historically required offices and boardrooms and paper and pen and wet ink signatures. We make it possible to eliminate all of that. So in some ways, COVID was beneficial for us because all of a sudden lawyers needed to be able to work from anywhere, and that's what we offer. In terms of the story, I was a corporate lawyer at a firm called Denton's. I was there for 3 years. It's an excellent firm, but like every law firm at the time, everything was done with paper. And so I was a junior, and I would be at the office until 4 or 5 a.m. pushing paper around, making sure deals are getting done on time before the closing date, with things like clients saying they're going on vacation next week, so they need everything, a week early. Kind of getting thrown curveballs every day and every night, just trying to keep all the paper and signatures and clients and everyone and accountants, everyone on the same page, which the only way you can do it without technology is by throwing people at it, which Denton's had. So after experiencing a number of transactions, it just, like the classic, there's got to be a better way. And so that's where Deal Closer came from. And that was about 3 years ago, but it's really in the last year that things have started to, I'd say we got product market fit. The last kind of features we needed came into place. it's very tough to build a very sophisticated platform with 2 developers. They were working around the clock. Thankfully now they have more people helping them, our 2 first developers. So a lot's changed in the last year for us. And then COVID happened, and that had good and bad effects for us. But we were fortunate that it actually did have some positive things come out for us. So, and I'm sure we'll be talking about all of that in a moment. So thank you.
Yeah, certainly dig into that a bit more. And yeah, thank you very much. And it really highlights where some of these entrepreneurial ideas come from, is really looking at a process that needs improvement and finding that automated solution, which somewhat ties to what AltaML does as well. So, so seeing lots of synergies here, which is great. So Michael, did you want to tell us a bit about your story?
Absolutely. So my name is Michael Wilson. I'm CEO and co-founder at Drug Bank. So Drug Bank is a pharmaceutical knowledge base. Our goal is to capture everything that we know about drugs and how they work. We capture information about approved drugs, so drugs you might get a prescription to, but we also look at drugs that are currently in research, clinical trials, or very early stages of research. And we capture a lot of different types of information, everything from the side effects of a drug to what's the chemical structure, what proteins does it interact with in your body. Our customers include customers on the clinical side of things, so genetic testing companies, electronic medical record companies, as well as customers on the drug development side. So companies using AI to find new drugs or find new purposes for existing drugs. And so there's quite a lot of different use cases, but basically our goal is we kind of think of that knowledge base as the core technology in our company. We build different tools on top of it to enable the advancement of data-driven medicine. Essentially, is our kind of big goal, and in the future we'll keep building new tools on top of that core database. The history of the company is that it started. So the history is interesting because Drug Bank actually started a long time before the company as a project at the University of Alberta as well, in Dr. David Wishart's lab. So it's actually about 14 years ago that Drug Bank started. The company started about 4 years ago. So we would be considered a spin out from the U of A. So we spun the technology out of the University of Alberta into the company, and then we commercialized it and kind of it grew from there. So when we spun it out into the company, it already had quite a lot of traction around the world with academic researchers, but there was no business model attached to that research project. So we developed that, we grew that, and we've expanded the project substantially as a company. So it's now used by more than 10 million users per year around the world, including health professionals and researchers. It's cited over 10 times every single day in academic research. And it's we have customers located in more than 20 countries around the world. So we've been rapidly growing from a couple of people to now we have 30 people at the company. The COVID-19 situation has been quite a strange situation for us, so it's affected our company in different ways. Our company is very relevant. It's a very relevant situation for our company because we do work in the drug development area. So we're proud that we've been able to contribute to more than 100 research projects looking for treatments for COVID-19, and some drugs coming out of those research projects are in clinical trials already. So we're having a direct impact on finding a potential treatment that can help with the situation, which is really exciting for us. And then we've also been able to contribute a lot to providing just free information for researchers and people around the world to understand the drugs that are coming out that are, you hear about them in the news. We provide a whole bunch of background information about those. So We've had like, I think a 20,000% increase in traffic on those pages, just related to COVID-19 drugs or potential treatments. So it's another thing that we're proud about. So we do give a lot of information away for free to academic researchers to support those causes. So that's been one of the exciting ways that we've been able to kind of shift what we're doing with this global pandemic. But one of the challenging things that has affected our company is we were in the middle of raising money when the global pandemic started. So of course, the markets were crashing around the world. Some of the investors were starting to panic. We had some very panicked phone calls with investors who were very scared, I would say. And so there's a lot of uncertainty. And so we had to really shift our investment strategy. It was kind of, this is another thing about with momentum. You really need to keep the momentum going with an investment round. And so the momentum got quite derailed when things started ramping up and people started shutting things down in North America. But we were able to kind of shift things. We developed a whole strategy around different worst case scenarios and projections, and kind of shifted our story and our strategy there. And we were able to bring in the investors. It just took probably twice as long as it would have if there wasn't a global pandemic, but can't really complain. And then of course now we've been ramping up hiring people. So we've hired 10 people in the last 2 months, and so there's now more than a third of our company that I've never actually met in person, which is interesting. So yeah, so there's been a lot of shifts, and a lot of different challenges, but some benefits, I guess, as well, similar to Amir.
Perfect.
The deal closer.
Good. Well, thank you for that. And again, some synergies. I'm seeing again the U of A hiring, similar to some of the other panelists as well, which is in this economy is amazing to see because that's not the case everywhere. So given that, again, thank you very much for all of you giving us a bit of background about your organizations and some of those opening insights. But now we're going to dive in to a little bit more detail about some aspects of your business. So to start and to begin, let's look at the human aspect of your business. So, and again, a few of you have already touched on that. And as you work through the challenges of the past few months, what workforce changes have been most significant? And can you give us an idea of your re-entry strategy for your teams? And Alyssa, did you want to maybe kick this one off?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So like I mentioned at the beginning, the human aspect was probably the thing that we focused on most, and we're very intentional of being aware of it. If someone comes into the office with sweatpants and unkempt hair, in pre-COVID, you would maybe have some questions and concerns, and now it's like, well, that's just Wednesday. So the point is just we started to put a lot of things in place really intentionally to make sure that we're taking care of everyone. Last week, actually, AltaML mandated for the entire company 2 days off, in addition to the holiday. And the reason for that is no one was taking vacation because where am I going to go? So, no Slack, no email, you're all taking 2 days off. And I can definitely say there was a measurable impact in, everyone's kind of mood and energy. So that was one thing we really mandated, in addition to mandating more mental health check-ins with our one-on-ones, channels where people can just hop in for a coffee, trying to replicate as much of that social or collision interaction that you would experience in an office. Work from home buddies. I have a stand up every day with, my buddy where we just check in on each other. And I would just say that there's also been some great benefits. Like a lot of our employees do very head down focused development coding type work. So the transition to actually being able to work from home is probably something almost invariably that we'll incorporate when we do go back to work. In phase 3, likely, we are moving offices right now, which is really exciting. Especially, Michael mentioned it, but we did onboard a number of people who have not even been to our old office, but will be in our new office. So we're just thinking a little bit about the technologies, the touch points, and the way we'll interact there. So making small adjustments to the new space to allow for, better social distancing and physical distancing, and touch point cleanliness. But I do think we're taking some learnings as well about how people work and some flexibility in work models that will be beneficial for future work.
Perfect. Yes, and I can certainly relate to that too. Even with Robert Half, we have learned a lot about seeing how people work remotely and how there's aspects of it that actually work really well. And it was probably an eye opener for us because we just had never done it before. So thank you so much, Alyssa, for that. So Amir, did you want to give your insight?
Sure. So as a small tech company, especially even a year ago when it was, I guess, 4 or 5 of us, we've always worked remotely. Our CTO for a while was in Colombia, working in Colombia. He's back in Edmonton, and he came back right before COVID, so that was good timing. But so when your CTO is in Colombia, it's the standard is set already. We have no problem. We never had a problem with remote work. It is really nice to have people in the office. And we were really excited that he would be back, and we had a few new people, and we were really eager that we would all be there. And then COVID happens. So similar to Mike, there's people on the team I haven't met in person yet, and may not for a while. Like one guy in the US, I probably won't meet him until there's a vaccine, I suppose. So that's an odd thing. And as much as we've always been used to working with Slack and Zoom, and we have like a policy that when it's an internal meeting, the camera is on just so you can connect somewhat with the person. And as much as it's worked really well for us and we've been able to build this company doing it, we were really looking forward to starting to work all together and get to meet some people that we hadn't met before. And at the time, a lot of people hadn't met Mike because he had been my CTO, he'd been out of the country working. So it didn't change efficiency or anything like that. So this is negligible impact in terms of our business, and not even morale, but like it would have been very nice to like start working together in person and getting to know each other and building a culture, which I think is challenging to do over video calls. And something that we really were excited about, Mike and me, was to build Deal Closers culture. And that is happening, but I think a lot maybe slower than it would have happened if we were all 12 of us starting to work together. The only other real difference, we are back in the office. This is where I'm in the office right now. So we are starting to come back. People can come as they want. We do try to coordinate to make sure we're not going to have more than 4 people here, but we're at a co-working space, so there's lots of space outside. So we could all be here and theoretically spread out. So we do try to coordinate it a little bit though, so we don't have too many people. But it's, it was something we were really excited for, and it just didn't really happen. And hopefully it'll happen in the coming months. But yeah, so that's been the main impact. It's just, it would have been nice, but we're all used to this. I think you're on mute.
See, we talked about that earlier, right? Yeah, I think, what I've heard from both of you is kind of working remotely can happen, and we've done it, and you do see some benefits, and people can be productive, but I think from a culture perspective, that face-to-face interaction is different, and so as we kind of continue to progress through this, it'll be interesting to see how organizations, not only yourselves but others, and organizations of all sizes, really try to bring together the remote and the face-to-face so that culture can still exist. So, but again, thank you so much for that. And Michael, did you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, so as Amir touched on, culture is a big challenge for sure. Culture is something we spend a lot of time thinking about, and it's really important to our organization. We spend a lot of time building that up. Logistically, there wasn't a lot of challenges because of the way, a lot of our software is already cloud-based, et cetera. But yeah, there's certainly a cultural challenge. There's a good social aspect to being in the same space, and it's very easy to develop that sense of being on a team without trying that hard when you're all in the same space. So there's definitely a lot more kind of experiments we had to do in trying to create some of those same effects online. So virtual coffees. When new teams have joined, we do virtual kind of a virtual meet and greet with the whole team, and basically take the time to try to get to know each other a bit and be more intentional about it than you would have to be in the office space. The other aspect, of course, the reason why this is happening is quite a stressful situation, and kind of it affects a lot of people in different ways. Lots of people's partners, lots of people who have kids now have to deal with their kids being at home. So there's a lot of different challenges people had. And so we definitely try to emphasize the importance of mental health as well. And we institute a policy of basically, we just reminded people that mental health is also, taking a sick day for a mental health day is an important thing to do if needed, to deal with the stress of kind of this weird situation. You have this background stress going on all the time that's not very normal. So that's one thing we've tried to do. The other thing is not everyone has, some people had a nice home office to work in, other people don't. So lots of people did not expect that they'd be working at home. So we did institute kind of a bit of a budget for everyone to try and improve their home office a bit, and try to help out in that way, which can, again, make it a bit better to work at home. So yeah, that's some of the things that we did. And yeah, I think we've tried certain things that were less successful and other things that were more successful. But it's, the main thing is trying to really be a lot more intentional. There was actually one benefit we already had some remote workers, and for them, it's been actually nice to be able to connect with each other, with people on the team more than they previously did. So I think going forward, there'll be some great lessons that we can learn from this about how to bring in the remote workers, make them feel connected. So yeah.
Perfect, thank you. And so the one thing that showed there was intentional. I think we've had to all kind of be much more cognizant of keeping people together in a world that, we're not used to, most of us. So Ryan, did you want to share your insights?
Absolutely. Yeah, the human aspect, I think, just like with the rest of you, is a huge challenge for us. I'd say the one difference, I think, between our business and your guys is the other three panelists is that we have some hardware aspect. There's some hard goods that we produce. And so if you buy something from us, usually there'll be a pallet or a box or some kind of shipment. And that also means that we have physical stuff in our office with people who actually build physical things. It's not all in the cloud. It's just infinitely deployable through AWS. And so our shift, we did some remote work, and we were well situated for, Slack and Dropbox and all the ways that we could go remote. But in terms of actually doing the work, I think that now that we're sitting here in June, it's very different. But in the middle of March, we're really looking at the first phase of what is a response to this? The question marks were huge, and I kind of try to think back and put ourselves in our shoes of saying, is the world economy going to completely fall apart? Are people going to want to buy our stuff 3 months from now? And even the current projects we have ongoing, are some of those going to get cut? And even though we play a lot in vertical farming and food security, the outcomes for that and the change in sentiment in the community and globally towards the benefits of that have been really positive for us. That wasn't revenue in April. And so trying to look at the long-term opportunities for our business. And so one of the things we did is on the human side, is not knowing exactly what this was going to mean for the momentum and scaling of our business, as we moved everybody back to a 4-day work week. And so rather than, super conservative cuts of a bunch of positions or salary cuts, said, let's move everybody back to 4-day work week. Friday is now a weekend day. We're going to do a little bit less. We know that supply chain is harder. It's harder to get stuff in. Our customers are moving a little bit more slowly. We can generally manage that, but also give, almost every person had something in the other part of their life, which I think that, we have a really great team and a really great culture, but I'd say that modern North American business culture isn't necessarily bring your whole self, right? There's still, it's like, oh, you're here 40 hours a week and then maybe plus some, and these are the expectations, as opposed to, you know, really being able to understand on an individual basis that there's like, oh, this person's dealing with a sick parent. This person's dealing with family who's overseas trying to get back. This person has a couple of kids at home and no childcare. Personally, my daughter turned 2 a year after, or like a couple days after the pandemic came in, and my wife works at a hospital. And so I was right there carrying the torch of, my work hours are going to drastically shift, and now we have to learn how to overlap, and I'm going to be a daytime dad and nighttime CEO and all these kind of things, and tried to really set that example of this is okay. We have to respond. We're going to find working hours that work for everybody, and we're going to scale back where we can, and we're going to all try to do this with some kind of level of equality. The second phase, though, was really interesting because, you know, we set up digital lunches and all this, and Friday beers, everybody's, you know, playing online Pictionary and drinking at their home office. But kind of the how are we going to live in this for a much longer time? And so it's kind of like, look at the first 2 weeks, okay, we can make sure we're going to be here. Look at, kind of live through the next couple of months. And so now we're really looking at the impacts of some of the changes that we've made. We've at the lowest point still had 3 or 4 staff who were going into the office every day, shipping things, building things. We did have to move some experimental setups and physical things to build to some people's houses, so it wasn't just office chairs. And so dealt with that, but then looking at how are we actually going to do this, you know, indefinitely? How do we live like this? And especially the cultural pieces around that, because there were unintended consequences to keeping some people in the office. And some people at home. Obviously, you have different factions. You know, some people can do yoga at lunchtime and some people can't, or whatever the things are, different working hours, different expectations. And so just trying to now look for a go-forward strategy where we can still be really safe, you know, keep mental health, make sure we're doing everything to avoid any issues with the pandemic, but also make sure that we have, you know, people who don't have to go to site. Maybe we'll go to the office 1 day a week so that they can, and they can integrate, and we can have some more of those cross sections with our team. So that's been the big thing, and just trying to keep that level of momentum, keep the talent, the skill, everything that we've spun up as a group for the last couple of years, but also, you know, have a lot of grace with individuals as the first step, and now looking how we can do that. How can we maintain that for an indefinite period of time?
Perfect, thank you. And so, yeah, so I you know, what I hear out of that is the flexibility, and really, as you mentioned, the grace, kind of that empathy and understanding of what's going to work for each individual employee, so that they can be most comfortable at work and most productive for your organization. And I see that with a lot of our clients now, and again, including Robert Half, is a learning that COVID has given us. And so hopefully we can continue to carry that forward and have even more productive workforces and happy employees. So now we'll move on to our next question, which is looking at the technology factor. So we've touched a little bit on that in this question already, but so how is shifting more of a remote workforce impacted your organization in a technology sense? And I know some of you said you're already working remotely, so probably not much, but maybe there might have been some tweaks. And what kinds of tools will you continue to integrate or even remove as your business may return to the office, and as you look to having that sort of different structure moving forward of some remote work, some in-office work? Amir, did you want to kick us off with that one?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I mean, it's pretty simple for us. And I think Mike mentioned this, we have always used cloud tools. So we use G Suite. We make a cloud-based tool, so it would not really be walking the talk if we didn't. So a huge fan of Slack. I probably should buy shares in them for the amount I use it. Slack just does everything we need it to do. And then, so yeah, like all of our communication is either Slack or Google Meet. Everything with customers is Zoom, because we find it just easier to use, and it doesn't matter what browser you're using. So we use Zoom with customers. We use Google Meet amongst ourselves, Slack instead of email, of course. I think I send a ton of emails, but to my team, I probably send one email a week, if that, because we're using Slack so much. And part of onboarding any new person is like, if they don't know how to use Slack, they better learn, because that's how we get a hold of each other. And then, document management and all that other stuff, it's all done through G Suite. So I guess our tech stack is Slack, G Suite, a little bit of Word, not much. So Office, Zoom, and Google Meet. I think it's pretty much it between all those tools, which we were already using. Because again, for a while we had a CTO in Colombia. So yeah, there was like, we didn't have to, yeah, it was all ready to go anyways. So I mean, if there was maybe 50 of us, I could imagine the transition might be trickier to go from an office to remote, technologically speaking. But with such a small team, and even now, 12, it's those 5 or 6 tools that are everything we need.
Perfect. Yeah, no, and that makes sense, because yeah, you had mentioned that you were already you were all working remotely anyway, so you were very well set up to kind of manage that piece. It's interesting to hear the types of software that you were using though, because I know there's lots of different ones out there. So it's good for folks on the webinar to hear what people are using and using successfully as well. Okay, so Michael, did you want to give us your insights?
Sure. Yeah. So as I mentioned a bit before, we used a lot of cloud software already. We also use Slack extensively. One thing that's shifted is just, I mean, the volume of communications on Slack went from, it's kind of a lot of side communications going on there to all communications are on Slack. So we did have to kind of make some adjustments around, setting up some new channels for announcements, things like that, and setting up some kind of etiquette in certain channels. We set up some channels for sharing fun things from home, like pictures of pets and stuff like that, so that because just the volume went up, where if there's too many things happening in the general communication channel, it's very easy to lose track of stuff in Slack. So not a huge shift, but we had to just shift some of our practices in Slack. And then the one thing that's been really interesting, just technology-wise, has been conferences. So, well, actually webinars, conferences. So something that we were doing before was starting to set up booths at conferences and do, as part of our marketing strategy. So there's been a lot of virtual conferences that have started popping up. And so that's been a really interesting use of technology. I'm very curious to see if that sticks around, because it has pros and cons, obviously, but we've had some pretty successful, virtual conferences and some that were very unsuccessful, just different technologies, and people are doing lots of experimenting. But I mean, the benefit there is the friction is very low. You can meet with people around the world. The cost is low. You're not, producing greenhouse emissions when you're traveling. And so it's quite an interesting thing that I'm hoping that it sticks around a bit. I mean, going to an in-person conference is nice, but having more virtual conferences would be great. And then we've also started kind of using webinars quite a bit as well, and doing some experiments there. And that's been another really interesting way to reach out to reach our customers or reach potential prospects. So those are two technologies that we were not using at all before that we've started to adopt, and they're really successful, really interesting, and I hope they stick around. That would be my insight in that.
Thank you. Yes, in the webinar side of things, I mean, we're on one today. We're certainly seeing a lot of that. And different ways of doing it, even trying to do networking, having people kind of go off into little separate rooms and talk and then come back. So there's all sorts of different things going on. So it'll be interesting, to your point, to see if that continues. All right, so Ryan, did you want to share with us next?
Yeah, I think similar to Mike and Amir, we also have cloud-based technology stack, Slack, G Suite, Dropbox, this whole range of products, which I think is probably pretty typical of a lot of young companies these days, because you can get a great suite of tools. Buy an employee a laptop, a couple per seat costs for some software and have them up and running, and pretty low and scalable, low cost IT solutions. So we were lucky that we were already in that case. Virtually everybody had a laptop, and so the take your laptop, come back next week for your chair and your monitor was a really easy response technology wise. The interesting thing that we've seen, I think, is maybe some use of those tools. So Mike talked about new channels for Slack, but just the way that we meet and transfer information. One thing that's been kind of a core part of our culture is we do these daily stand-ups. Big fan of this, kind of everybody gets a cross-section daily across the team. So a product team or a leadership team, a sales team, they each have a daily thing. We kind of roll those all up together. So if 2 points of the organization have these critical things happen within half an hour. And so we used to have this crazy shuffle that we would do where each of these are these 10-minute back-to-back meetings that were right after lunchtime. And some people needed to attend 3 of them. It was an absolute headache as our team grew. But when we shifted that over to Slack, all of a sudden that could happen in parallel in real time. I could be participating in 3 or 4 of these kind of ongoing daily updates, and not having to run from room to room, and actually be more focused to answer this question, and then be all done. And it was that we never would have, I think, thought about that unless we were totally remote and trying to find a replicant of that. So there's some interesting technology use cases that I think have come up for this that I think we can go forward with. There are also some things that I think that, in-person meeting for me that still has not been replaceable yet, and whiteboards. This is the thing I took a whiteboard off the wall at work and brought it home because I don't know what it is about having just big thoughts and pacing around, but the paper's not enough. And so I think there's some interesting things that haven't been replicated yet. But I've also been, like Mike said, looking forward to, in 2 weeks, we're participating in our first big sponsored conference exhibit. And so it would have been an event in New York in June that we would have been speaking at, but instead it's the Indoor Ag Tech Innovation Summit this year has gone virtual. And so I'll be really interested to see how we can engage with that. It's relatively new for us, and we're experimenting, and I think that we have to learn how to make it work for us because we don't know when the real conferences are coming back.
Right, yeah, no, fair enough. And they'll probably, moving forward, due to lower travel costs and those kinds of things because of, what we've seen with COVID and having all this stuff online, I anticipate we still will have in-person events, but maybe not as many as we did before. Maybe there'll be more of a combination moving forward. So perfect. Well, Alyssa, did you want to share?
So Ryan, I feel you on the whiteboard thing. I bought a giant one and it's on casters and stuff. So I definitely can commiserate with the need for that. So yeah, I think like everyone, we were pretty tech enabled. We're already distributed, 89 people in 3 offices. So getting virtual wasn't the biggest issue. VPNs and stuff for data transfer were already sort of set up. So I think the biggest thing for us is we co-develop and are very collaborative with our clients in developing ML, AI solutions and products. And so we had to come up with ways to collaborate with clients who may be on different technology suite, where it's usually very tangible, in-person relationship development piece too. So we got really comfortable using virtual whiteboards where we're using Miro right now, but there's a variety of different ones where all of a sudden you have to, facilitate ideation sessions or collaboration sessions with clients with a new technology that they haven't used or are familiar with before. So, a parallel learning curve of helping people get up to speed with a tool that you need them to use to achieve an objective, but also, maximizing that your own learning curve to be able to help everyone use that. But we have had great success being able to do these virtually. And in fact, we'll talk more in the rest of the conversation, being able to do these virtually has opened up a variety of different conversations for us where, we thought we had to be in person, but now we can be virtual. So, finally, I think I'm a bit of an extrovert. Anyone who knows me might know that, but I think there's this exhaustion of being on Zoom a little bit, even though you're moving less and doing less. There's something about back to back Zoom calls. I read somewhere it's because usually when you're talking to someone, you don't have to worry about your own face. And so I don't know about anyone else, but being very aware of my face all the time has been, a little bit exhausting. So, I think also putting some, work hours in place was really important about technology, not stacking your calendar with back-to-back Zoom meetings so you can, have lunch or take a bathroom break, and just being very disciplined about that was another piece. So yeah, that would be sort of the main comments around technology for us.
Thank you. Yes, and we've had actually a number of conversations at Robert Half too around you getting exhausted with the online meetings all the time. It is actually remarkable how tired you get. So yeah, trying to space them out a bit and then be doing different things in between even, if possible. So, all right. So now we've talked about people, we talked about technology. So let's talk about innovation and revenue next. So what lessons innovation were learned by your organization as you explored new options for revenue streams? And how do you see that impacting the way your business innovates moving forward? Whether was there lessons learned in, ways of collaborating and idea generation? So Michael, did you maybe want to start us off on this one?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's definitely happened is that because there's more uncertainty in the business environment, there's a lot more. We've actually still been increasing our growth rate over time, but there's been certain changes around. We've noticed a lot of changes around uncertainty and how people make decisions, taking longer to make decisions. So it's not exactly innovation, but we've had to adjust just some of the processes we use in sales to make sure that we're helping deal with that uncertainty, giving people more information, giving people more data, and basically helping to move them along that way. And sometimes just being more patient, I guess, in getting a deal closed. And then in other cases, we've had to cut deals with the customer because their business is struggling, and it's maybe we give them a deal, give them a break for a year or something on the price to keep them as a customer. And so there's been some things in that way, not exactly innovation, but one of the things we've done that's a bit more innovative is just adapting some of our marketing strategies to basically, well, two things. One, evaluating which markets. So some of the people on this call have said, they've seen positive impacts in their business. Other types of business are seeing negative impacts. So we've kind of evaluated the different verticals, different segments within our customers that are really rapidly growing, and try to adjust some of our marketing strategies to target those segments that are growing rapidly. So things like telemedicine, for example, are just telemedicine companies are just exploding. They're all seeing like multiple 1,000% increases in their user bases. So, that's one area where it's important to basically adapt and respond to things like that are occurring, I guess, all the time. So it's a good lesson to take away from, paying attention to what's happening in the market and taking advantage of trends like that. But in other ways, this is not a very normal situation. The other thing that we've done is we've tried to create a number of free tools, dashboards, and tools that are focused on COVID-19. We've partnered with some different organizations to support their efforts. And so there's been a lot of basically, marketing. It's a combination. One, we're contributing to research for COVID-19, but it also increases our global presence and awareness. And so there's been some really interesting marketing opportunities that have come up that we've basically put some development time towards and augmenting some of our tools specifically for COVID-19. We did a bunch of research and published research related to that, and we have kind of a whole project that's ongoing right now where we have a COVID-19 dashboard, and we bring together research related to COVID-19. So we very quickly put that together as a way to adapt. Yeah, that's, you know, an indirect contribution to revenue stream, but we have seen a lot of increases in, you know, traction and leads coming in through those types of channels. So that's some of the things we did. It's a bit specific to our organization, but basically with any organization, it's important to just look at which, you know, verticals are benefiting and trying to focus your efforts on those, I guess. And yeah, we've been able to, you know, increase our growth rate during this pandemic. So you know, I guess we were successful in that way, but it's also a bit of luck, to be honest, just because of the nature of our business. It's just very, very relevant to our business. So it just happens to be that this situation is very relevant to our business. So I can't really take all the credit for that, I guess. But that's kind of some of the things that we've done.
Perfect, thank you. And yeah, and so I mean, you mentioned the situation just happens to, you know, obviously align with your business, but you've obviously tried to take advantage of that and then, you know, continue to push to that growth. So that's excellent. So Ryan, did you want to give us some insight?
Absolutely. I think that unlike Mike's business, you know, we weren't fortunate to the people that the thing we sell didn't help people get rid of COVID or learn more about it instantly. And so, and our sales cycle in the first place are, you know, reasonably longer. You know, we often have 3, 6, some cases 12-month long sales cycles. And so that was expected. And so we even knew as a business that changing, you know, trying to open a new revenue stream the next day wouldn't necessarily move the dial in that month. That's normal for us, and that's how we plan. But the thing that we, you know, it's not even, I wouldn't call it innovative, but we really kind of focused back to at the beginning was just the relationship aspect. All of a sudden, you have basically every organization, and they're also saying, we don't know. The only advice we're getting is sit on all of your cash. Don't spend any of it, cut all your expenses. And, you know, you're sitting there with your own organization saying that. And so more so getting a chance, you know, every call now for a long time was, you know, like, what's going on? You got kids at home, and just like actually learning a lot more about people as humans that you're doing business with. And because there's a good chance, like the deal wasn't on the table this month anymore, but you know, there's still an opportunity to deepen that relationship and build that. And so, and through those conversations, you know, you start to learn maybe a second layer of insight around their market and where it's heading and what's happening with their capital and all those aspects. So really that opportunity to just listen as a human, as a person, you know, develop those relationships a bit deeper than normally you would be talking about the specs and the product and the deal and how we're going to create this as a solution for this specifically specified problem, as opposed to everything else that's around it. And some things that have come out of that, certainly we have a lot of top tier university academic customers, you know, almost 20 countries or something like that. And so, you know, keeping an eye on where different countries are treating, you know, university grant budgets and those budgets that would normally be used to, you know, turn into sales for us, and understanding a lot of what jurisdictions are those going away because governments are now spend a whole bunch of money in pandemic relief. And for us, looking at, okay, well, maybe as opposed to capital purchases, we can work into operational budgets with the services and products we provide, and insights like that. And then the other one more locally has been around just availability. And one of our investors said it really well around, you know, just look at like, what's there a lot available of, and you know, where's their supply, where's their demand, and trying to match those. And so we're seeing lots of, I think it's no secret that we're seeing lots of commercial space that's likely to be challenged to be, you know, fully rented out in the coming years. A lot of people who are moving more remotely, a lot of unused high profile commercial space, and some people looking at, can we use this for vertical farms? Can we use this for food production, for food security? And so for us, that creates an opportunity. And so we've been looking at some of those projects and really excited to see a lot more of the conversation about how can we use this excess of space that we project to be coming up in the next, you know, year to 5 years, and this potential demand for more food, more for food security, and we have an opportunity to link those things together. And same thing, just listening to the people around us who have those problems.
Interesting. No, that's good, because certainly there's definitely going to be some real estate available. So it's good to see that we're looking at different ways of utilizing that. So that's awesome. Alyssa, did you want to give us your thoughts?
I think for us, the biggest thing was recognizing that a lot of these borders for business are relatively artificial. We closed, 2 deals in the U.S. and we're talking to, a company with a head office in India right now. And so I think for me, even as a business development professional, thinking outside of the markets of, Alberta, where we have offices, in Toronto as well, was really enormous. And because we could tell such a compelling story about the AI talent pool that you're getting out of Alberta, I just see it as a huge way to be able to export that competitive advantage we have here. And telling that story, like we're, talking to a client in Seattle, for example, and they're like, I had no idea. And I'm like, don't worry about it. A lot of people in Alberta don't have any idea. But truly, I think when we started to think about ways to, interesting revenue streams and things like that, it was definitely looking outside of our borders for different markets. And really, it wasn't even a non-issue. I think what COVID did and everyone being so comfortable with virtual, it didn't even really matter that we weren't in the city that they operate in or that their head office is in. It was more like, what can you bring to my organization wherever you are? And so I just thought, to me, the world is cracked open with that potential. So that would be probably the biggest thing from innovation or takeaway that I've seen, and just so great to be able to share some of the Alberta focus around AI ML with other areas of the world.
Yes, and it's really good to continue that message, because we have so much talent here, and I mean it's shown in every one of your organizations and with all of you. So it's really good to showcase that everyone, and not just Canadians, but the world. And another great advantage of technology, to your point, I mean, people can log in from anywhere. So that is one of the great things that it brings to the table. Amir, did you want to share your comments?
I think most of it has really been said already. I think there's only so many trends that can come out of COVID and the things we're discussing. But I mean, what happened ultimately was some firms were like, we need this now. We can't work from the office. We need this now. Some firms, I think, were like, we're not sure if we'll exist in a month from now. And they were not buying technology. And then there were some firms that are like, okay, people need to work from home. We don't even have VPNs or whatever. They had to like get the ability to like have a laptop at home, much less more advanced technology like ours. So some things were put on pause, some disappeared, some opportunities disappeared completely, and some were greatly accelerated. Lawyers are really hard to sell to, so sales cycles are pretty long. And so it was really interesting to see some firms go from like, yeah, we'll decide, we're in no real rush, to all of a sudden being like, how soon can we get started? Which was almost a nice change. If only it didn't have to come with COVID, but it was a nice change. And I think that's kind of been said already. I have not a whole lot new to add on that. The only other thing I'd say is we were considering opening an office in Toronto. That's kind of the center of the legal world in Canada, and then New York would be the next step. So we were thinking like, okay, let's go to maybe Toronto. Let's start with even just a desk there at a co-working space, and let's be present where the big law firms are. And then COVID happened, and so of course we weren't going to go anywhere. And then we realized like, it doesn't matter anymore because everyone's using Zoom anyways. So do we even need to be in Toronto to be, developing a presence? I still think it'll be important, especially as things open up and it becomes, things go back to normal next year. But for now, what we saw is a potential, revenue opportunity of being in the center of things. With legally speaking, I don't want to give Toronto the credit of being the center of everything. So I'll just say center of the legal the legal center of Canada, let's put it that way. That's on hold now, but I think it will be important later on.
Perfect, thank you. So moving on from, discussion around revenue streams and continuing the discussion of revenue, how has the forecasting and budgeting changed, or has it? And what have you found that has worked best to keep your business driving forward? Because we talked earlier about momentum being critical, and particularly to a small business. So obviously there's lots of considerations around investor funding and all of that sort of thing. And how are you going to continue to build? So maybe if you want to comment a little on that. And then Ryan, did you want to start us off?
Yeah, that definitely can. I think that the first thing, I talked a little bit about this, was just that reaction, right? We're sitting there in the middle of March and going, what does this look like? And like Mike also mentioned, worst case, what is the absolute worst case that we're looking at, and how do we be ready for that? And then, we had really great financial hygiene prior to that, with, quarterly reviews, monthly reviews, budgets, actuals, but that became, there's some weeks where we're looking at it every day and a bunch of scenarios, and certainly weekly. And so the speed of that, just because the uncertainty in the market, was really big. We also started looking, I think, a lot more deeply, or a lot more high cadence into the very early indicators. And so for us, we have pretty good statistics through our, from website all the way through sale, and our data attribution through that. Our digital marketing team does a phenomenal job of that. And so looking at, every day and week in March, like how is the very top of interest looking, and that's as a kind of marker for overall market interest. So there's still massive uncertainty, and so we were really lucky within our investor group and some federal matching programs to get investor group came forward, one of our venture funds, and basically offered to lead a bridge round for us when we didn't specifically need it. We weren't sitting there dying on the vine, but we started looking a lot more at runway in a way that we hadn't had to for a while. And started looking at what happens. What happens if another sale doesn't come in for 12 months? What does that actually look like? And what does our survival plan look like? We've been really lucky that hasn't been the case, but starting to have the conversation, talk about, every 2 weeks, what is our runway again, which is a very startup thing to do. And so, but it's also good to look around and just make sure we're not spending too much on the things that we don't need to.
Right. Excellent. Yes. Certainly I can acknowledge too, when this all first hit, it was certainly a daily basis that you were trying to figure out. Okay, so now what? At least there seems to be somewhat things stabilizing now, and I guess we'll see what happens over the next few months. Alyssa, did you want to share on this?
Yeah, for sure. I echo a lot of sort of those tactical things that Ryan talked about. But I think for us, like in Q2, due to the uncertainty, people were like, it's not that I don't want to do this, but like I need to move, thousands of people virtual. So this is not a priority for me right now. And so just being, again, really empathetic to people's process. And so a lot of projects were maybe deferred, delayed. We didn't have too many cancel. We just had to essentially readjust our targets, understanding that Q3, Q4 hopefully are going to see, revenue increase again. And actually we have seen that be the case. So I think because people are realizing they may have to do more than less, or have to augment their employees with technology, they are leaning into some of their digital transformation or tech strategies. And I think for some reason, the inertia of all of the change with COVID and adopting technology has kind of opened the door for this. And I think additionally, we've looked at other types of funding as well, like, super cluster funding or interesting projects that might have a different kind of lens on how we're getting revenue. But ultimately, I think we're optimistic for Q3, Q4 as everyone kind of reevaluates their own new fiscal health. So yeah, I think that it was hard, and it's getting better. I think that's the easiest way to summarize it. Thank you.
Thank you. Amir.
So in like true startup fashion, till about February of this year, we really did not have any control over, or we didn't have anything really formal in place about our financial side. We just, no one had that strength on the team. We were really focused on building the business, getting customers. We had rough ideas of where we stood financially, and I would just look at the bank account, and that was about it. We kind of, we needed more, but we also just didn't have the time or ability. So we did our best, which is a lot of what startups are. You're just doing your best and you MVP every aspect of your business. But then in February, so right, like coincidental timing, in February, we decided, okay, we should probably get like a part-time CFO type person. And so we did find someone. He's a CA. He worked at KPMG, at Aurora, tons of, really good background. And he came in and he started helping us get things under control and in order. And then the pandemic happened, and I am so grateful he was on the team, because to navigate the wage subsidies and the 2 wage subsidies, first there was 1 wage subsidy, then there was this, you know, the second one, to determine like whether you you can apply for it or not, and just getting a better control over our finances. He was able to step in, and he did it all for us, really, and he does it all for us. And I've learned a ton from him. But now basically so we have a weekly cash flow meeting, just like, you know, Ryan mentions, we do it once a week. I can ask like, where does he, you know, I can get an estimate of where our cash balance will be, you know, 5, 6 weeks, 7 weeks out. We have forecasting now. So beyond just like where our cash is, like we have forecasting for the next year and a half. All these things that you should have, and you know, investors want to see it. But like, I would put together a terrible Excel spreadsheet with barely any information, because I didn't know what I was doing, and that's the truth. He built a really robust model that really reflects our reality and uses historical growth and historical data. So I think he really leveled us up in terms of, you know, what you'd expect to see now on the finance side. And he was always saying, like, people don't really, at startups, they don't really understand the need for this, and they don't really get it, and they think it's dumb, and then they have it, and then they understand why. And that's exactly what happened. It was something I never wanted to think about because I was bad at it. And then now it's night and day difference. It makes planning so much easier. It makes talking to investors way easier. We now have KPIs in place that are like fairly sophisticated. Before it was just like, how many seats are we at? How much money did we make today? So it's now, you know, it's a lot more robust and sophisticated. And I think we actually now are operating at a level higher than most startups of our age, because he has so much experience. And we actually were able to bring him on full time at you know, he's giving us a huge discount on his value because he just likes working with us. And so he's now our like full-time CFO. And I kind of thought, like, why does a startup need a CFO? And now I'm just like, every day I'm like, hey, Shane, can we afford to do this? What about, you know, where are we going to stand in 2 weeks? Like, all these questions he can just, you know, he has at his fingertips because he's built all these models out. So yeah, forecasting, I went from hating it to thinking, I just don't know how we lived without it before.
Right. Well, and certainly, I can tell you I've been with Robert Half for 15 years and worked with a lot of organizations that, you know, were more at that startup, small to medium sized phase. And a number of them have echoed what you're saying. When they got a, you know, really strong qualified accountant to come in and start adding that value, it was very much mind blowing for them at how it is a game changer and how it takes you from here to there as a business. So that's great. That's excellent. So now you're poised to really knock it out of the park as the year progresses. Okay, Michael.
Yeah. So yeah, interesting. Before the pandemic, we were a bootstrap company. So we hadn't raised funding, and as I mentioned, we were raising capital right when it hit. So for us, we had done we did a lot of forecasting and budgeting, and kind of watching our cash flow very carefully to make, when you're bootstrapping, is really, really important to make sure that you don't run out of money, obviously. And so, yeah, I mean, we had a lot of tools there and things in place, and we were quite conservative with our projections. But basically, you know, with COVID, we went very, very conservative. We went beyond being conservative and started thinking about, like, you know, what's the actual, you know, worst case scenario? What happens if 30% of our customers leave every month for the next 6 months? How long would our company last? What happens if, you know, but basically looking at these terrible scenarios, what happens if we don't make a single sale for the next year? And basically trying to get an idea of, will the company survive? Will it not? How, you know, we don't want those scenarios to happen, but we wanted to know what would happen if that. So, you know, so we previously would have sort of worst case scenarios would be more about, you know, missing targets or getting 50% less sales than we expected to, et cetera. So a lot, you know, comparatively optimistic compared to the worst case scenarios we started looking at now. It was actually a really good exercise because, well, one, I mean, at first it's kind of grim to start thinking in that way, and it's kind of depressing. But then once you do the exercise and think about that worst case scenario and start planning for it, it did make me feel better to at least know that we had a plan in place if something did go that badly. So yeah, it definitely was helpful for me to overcome some stress with the situation. It felt sort of like going into the I know, like facing the abyss, like going into it and then kind of coming out on the other side, like going through a dark tunnel. And it's pretty grim and depressing when there's all these things happening in the world and you're seeing horrible things in the news, and then you're thinking about just how badly it could go. But you know, in the end, obviously it didn't go that badly for us. And we were also having some pretty, you know, talking to some investors who were just like panicking and saying like, draw all your money out of every loan you have, remortgage your house, get as much cash as you can, like basically saying like do a run on the bank and put all your money under your mattress or something. So like some of them were, you know, really like, well, yeah, they really freaked me out basically. And there were some pretty dark moments, but basically facing those worst case scenarios head on, making a plan, dealing with it. It's good exercise and learned a lot from that. So yeah, that's kind of what we did. And I think that that's something we'll look at more going forward, is just maybe looking at really bad case scenarios and having a plan for it that you hope you never have to use.
Right. And yeah, and to your point, I mean, it is not always the most uplifting exercise as you're kind of looking at these dire situations. But if you have a plan where you know that you can deal with it, it gives you that sense of security that even if things do blow up, you know, you got a way to navigate it. And I think it's just actually, to be honest, that's probably a lesson that even not just corporately we could all use, but even personally, sometimes that's not a bad thing to have. So we have time for just a really quick, and I just want to throw this out to whoever may want to comment on it. We had what we like to call a bonus question, but you know, what has surprised you most about your organization through all of these changes and challenges? And so I just kind of wanted to throw it out to all of you to see who may want to comment on that. Something that really stood out that you were really taken aback by. Does anybody want to comment on that one?
Sure, I can go. I think the number one thing is we realize how different people's work styles are, and just like the comfort level of everyone working from home, and just understanding that like, yes, everything gets done, and yes, we can still move projects forward, and just how resilient everyone is. Really, like 65% of our team said they felt more productive working from home. So I think that was the big thing for me, and just how adaptable everyone is. That's pretty obvious, but it's been really inspiring to watch. And, you know, especially these like superheroes at home that are raising young kids. And I just honestly think it's superhero stuff to be able to deal with all the life stuff and the work stuff. So I've been really inspired, frankly, by everyone's ability to make it work and to thrive, you know, despite all the challenges.
Right. Perfect. Anyone else want to comment?
I mean, I would kind of echo that, and I mentioned the word grace before, but I think that there's some really amazing things that can happen when you treat people with grace, and like just look at each other as humans. That's like anybody that you do business with, and I think that we saw across whole industries, from, you know, suppliers and partners and everything like that, like the conversation of like, this is going to be late was drastically different in every single direction than it would have been in like normal pre-COVID times. Right? People get like very heated and contracts and all this kind of stuff, but everybody's just saying like, we're all on the same side of the table. And that true from the smallest interaction with an employee with their dog wandering into the screen and everybody laughing about it, which maybe before people have been like, that's so unprofessional, to every one of those things. And just like, like Alyssa has some great stats within her organization, but I have not thought that there's been a productivity loss because, you know, we've broken down some of these like professional barriers and things like that. So I think that that's been a very pleasant surprise.
Excellent. Good stuff. All right. So if Amir and Michael are good, then we will move on to some questions, because we do have some questions here. So let me open up my questions screen. So this question came up a bit earlier, and it said, thank you for sharing. A general question: if it's relevant to your growing teams during COVID, it would be interesting to know what percentage of your team growth was tied to revenue growth or funding and credit programs and investment. That makes sense. Who would like to take an opportunity with that one? Michael?
Yeah. Yeah. So it was interesting. There was a lot of different funding and credit programs that were announced, and I think it was, I forget who was mentioning it, but just trying to keep up with that was a bit of a challenge. A lot of those programs were really for businesses that were losing a lot of revenue. I think we were able to take advantage of one of the smaller programs. So it was just, it didn't really help us hire more people, but it, I guess, was a nice to have thing. And yeah, in terms of growth on our end, for what percentage of our growth was tied to revenue growth versus investment, when you're a startup raising money, that answer is a bit, your thinking is a bit different. So when our company went through a shift of bootstrapping to being funded by investors. So when you're bootstrapping, all of your growth is limited by how much cash you have. When you have investment, you're growing faster than your cash at first. Otherwise, why did you raise money? So you want to be actually growing your team faster than your cash is growing. So your thinking really changes once you've raised investment, and it's, you have that kind of projection and plan, and you're putting teams in place, people in place to fuel that future growth. That's kind of the whole point of investment. So certainly for us, we did kind of look at our hiring plan and adjust it based on, are we going to be able to hit our targets and numbers? So we kind of like hired certain people and then tried to hit some numbers and started seeing how it's going and seeing how the world was adjusting to the situation. And then because it was adjusting, because we saw that we were going to be able to hit our numbers, we were able to still execute on our hiring plan that we had already planned with the investment. So it was a factor of, we weren't just using our sales didn't increase enough to grow our team as much as we have. We're using some of our investment funds to do that. But if our sales had gone down, we would have had to adjust our hiring plan. So it's not exactly a direct percentage it's not quite how I think about it, but hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of the factors that go into that with investment funding.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. Did anybody else want to touch on that?
I can add,
Okay,
I mean,
sure.
I echo Mike's comments. When you raise money, part of it is to hire beyond your revenue, because that's like investment is fuel for the fire kind of thing. And if you wait till you're that level of revenue where you can hire those people, it's going to take longer, and things are better when they happen faster in the startup world because you have competition out there doing similar things. So for us, it's some of each. So we've hired based on revenue, investment, and then we've also been pretty successful in getting grants from both Alberta Innovates and IRAP. They have a lot of different kinds of grants, from really small ones for like a student to larger ones for like a professional's business development with a lot business development role with someone with a lot of experience. So we've taken advantage of those as well. And grants are they come with reporting requirements, which can be time consuming, but it's non-dilutive and you don't have to pay it back unless, you commit fraud and then you have to give it back. But so grants are pretty useful if you can get them.
Perfect. That's interesting. If it's fraud, then you have to pay it back. Yeah, no, I can see that. Okay, no, that's good. That's great insight. Another question that had come up, and it's, it's kind of just related to what we were talking about with conferences. And so somebody had asked, what would you term a successful online conference versus an unsuccessful one? Is that more related to the software platform used or the way it's managed and the interaction? So I thought I would just throw that out there because it is a medium that we're seeing more of. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I can answer. I was talking about that earlier. So
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess some of the unsuccessful ones, I mean, a really important part of a conference is making connections with people, meeting people, and obviously in our case, our goal is to find prospects that could become leads, become customers eventually. So there are some conferences that basically the software platform did not facilitate those interactions with individuals. So there's one we used where there's just people's names. You didn't even know what business they were. You had no idea where they were in the world. So it was like very, very hard to figure out who you should even try to talk to. So that was, that kind of situation. And I think it's just sort of growing pains. This was a conference. They quickly switched over to this software. They'd never done a virtual conference before. So I imagine they'll probably get better at it next time. And then there's another one which was really focused on making it easy to meet with other companies, and it was very much geared towards that and helping you match up with different people that you could have a relevant discussion with. So that one was a lot more successful because it was so geared towards that. So I do think, yeah, it's just a lot of it seemed to be the organizers and what software they're using and how they were thinking about it. But there's not really a good way to evaluate that in advance, unfortunately. But luckily, the cost of signing up for these virtual conferences is very low. It's usually it seems to be less than the cost of the plane ticket to attend the real life conference. So it's a great opportunity to experiment with different styles of conferences and different industries or different types of attendees at a much lower cost than actually going to a conference in real life.
Right. All right. Got a couple more here. So mental health has been mentioned a few times. How are you preparing for longer-term mental health support and ensuring high employee engagement?
I can answer that one.
Sure.
Candidly, the fact that it took COVID for us to put mental health front and center, and I know it has been front and center for a while in a lot of conversations, but I think the intentionality around not being able to see those visible markers every day of seeing everyone made the intentionality of talking about mental health a little bit more apparent. But what I would offer is just taking that intentionality and putting it when you're face to face, because we all know that mental health doesn't always have visible markers. We don't always know if people are suffering or if there's things going on in their lives. And so I do know that the continued engagement around the discussion around mental health, checking in with people, we are this work from home buddy thing, we're going to keep, even though we're going to just meet face to face in the office, and then have a no business talk, like just talk about your life and try and, put people, like our team's extremely diverse as well. We have people from all over the world working with us. And so making an effort to try and understand their perspective, their lens, their culture, where they're coming from is a big part of that as well. So I don't know if that, I'm sure it'll evolve. I'm sure we'll develop tools and tactics, but ultimately I think it's just remaining intentional even when we're back together.
Perfect. Yes. Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
I think the other piece around that is being flexible and assuming that the answer for maintaining mental health in your organization in June and July is not going to be the same as it will be in December or as it will be in 2022 or whatever that big question mark is. And so the things that were good for engagement for us in March and April, some of those things aren't working anymore. The novelty of some things has gone away and we've had to shift momentum, but there's nothing can really surpass figuring that out than just one-on-one reaching out to somebody and saying like, hey, do you have time for a coffee over Zoom or whatever? Let's get on the phone call and just like Alyssa said, that check-in. And so not assuming that there's just a policy and a practice we can put in place today that's going to solve this forever, but asking the question again next month and asking the question again next month, is what we're doing actually still working, and what would work now.
Good. Okay, so next question. We've learned a lot about how you adjusted with people, technology, and innovation. Post-COVID, do you see your business going back to the pre-COVID practices? And if not, what are the key things that you're planning on continuing or even, further evolving? Anybody want to take that one? Michael? Oh.
Go, Mike.
All right, I'll go really quickly. I was just going to say that I'm certain that things will change, but it's very hard to know for sure what's going to change. I think that a lot of things in the just world in general will change. I think that public, the way we interact with public spaces, there's so many things that are going to change in the world post-COVID, and we just have to be adaptable. And I'm certain that we're going to, for us, a big thing that will change for us is how we think about interacting with remote employees or employees in other locations. I think we're now just a lot better at connecting with people remotely, and we figured out a lot of great ways to do that. So that'll be a good benefit. I think it's going to be hard to, I don't think we'll be having a situation where every single person shows up to the office every day for quite a long time. So there's going to be a lot of things that we need to adapt.
Perfect. Melissa, did you want to comment as well, or?
Yeah, I would think that, two main things would be the flexible working from home hybrid. That's probably gonna continue. And then just really thinking outside of our, municipal, provincial, and federal borders for business. I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And last question. With 1/3 of the workforce in Canada now unemployed, what tips do the panel have for those who are looking to work at startups? And this individual mentioned that they may not fit the typical requirements and they want to stand out from the crowd. So is there anything specific as a startup that you look at for employees that maybe would be unique? Amir, did you want to comment on that?
Sure. I'll start with the dev side because that one's a bit easier. So we're a software business, so software developers are critical for us, and this is driven more from our CTO. But I'll say what doesn't make the difference is actually university education. Our CTO didn't go to university. He learned programming. He taught it to himself because when he was a kid, he started programming basically. So what we don't care about, did you go to school for computer programming? And typically what we find too is people straight out of school, and actually this is the same for lawyers for that matter. You don't know how to do what you learn how to learn, or you learn a lot of theory, but then when you have to come and start doing things, there's so much that you don't learn in school that you have to really be good at problem solving and teaching yourself things and a lot of skills that don't come necessarily with a degree. So in terms of standing out for us, so this is, I don't know if it's the same for everyone, but for us, we kind of look for 4 traits, and we ask questions during the interview to kind of probe for ultimately these 4 traits, which is that they're hardworking, smart, collaborative, and kind, and easy to get along with. So, and we kind of also look for people who can take the ball and run with it. That's kind of, there's all these concepts we try to boil down into like one sentence or like, you know, a few key traits, but really, you know, so it's not necessarily that you went to school to be the best developer at school and got the highest grades. Most of our developers didn't, and they just have tons of experience, which can also be tricky to get, but they have good experience and they taught themselves, but more importantly, they meet those requirements that they're hardworking, collaborative, team player. That's how we put it, team player and smart. So I don't know if that helps, but I will say that, yeah, it's not, you know, even if you didn't get formally trained in whatever it is you'd be applying for at a startup, startups just need people that can get stuff done. And more importantly, almost, they can get stuff done without being told every time what they need to do next, because everyone does a lot of different things at a startup. So someone who can, you know, adapt quickly and take the ball and run with it. If you can show that, that's really important over a formal education in the field that you're applying for.
Good.
But
Well,
that's
thank
for
you.
the
Yeah, no, and that's great. And it does certainly seem consistent with what you would expect with employees at a startup. So thank you. So we're at 1 o'clock. So definitely time to wrap up. So now I will pass it over to Rajan for closing comments.
Thanks, Evangeline. I guess just quickly, though, I know the one comment I just wanted to make in closing was we've talked a lot about the people aspect, the mental health aspect, the work-life flexibility. I think just due to the nature of what myself and Evangeline do day in and day out, dealing with candidates and clients, the biggest learning for me during COVID has probably been the people aspect of it. I think people quickly forget that people are resilient. You know, uncertainty and change are always challenging, but people adapt and move on. And we've seen and heard that every day of COVID. And I think you four are great examples of that, obviously taking a big risk, being startup companies and being successful as to where you are right now. So thank you for that. So thank you to the panelists for your insights. They were fantastic. Wanted to say thank you to Evangeline for moderating this session. And thanks to all the individuals who attended the session. We appreciate you taking the time. Looking forward to staying in touch. For now, stay safe and stay well, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care, everyone.